In the small, quiet village of Eldridge, deep within a forest, there was an old legend about a sinister presence known as the Shadow Man. Every 10 years, when the moon was full and the night was eerily silent, the Shadow Man would come to claim a soul. The villagers described him as a tall figure, cloaked in darkness, with eyes that glowed like embers. His arrival was always preceded by a chilling wind that swept through the village, carrying with it a sense of dread. One fateful night, 10 years since the last sighting, the village was unusually quiet. A thick fog rolled in, blanketing the streets in a ghostly veil. The villagers locked their doors and windows, fearing the return of the Shadow Man. Among them was a young girl named Clara, who had always been curious about the legend. Clara lived with her grandmother, who had witnessed the Shadow Man's arrival decades ago. She warned Clara to stay inside and never look out the window during the full moon. But Clara's curiosity got the better of her. She wanted to see if the legend was true. As the night grew darker, Clara peered out of her window. The fog was thick, and the village was silent. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the room, making Clara shiver. Her heart raced as she saw a tall, shadowy figure standing at the edge of the village, just as the legend described. The Shadow Man's eyes glowed a fiery red, piercing through the darkness. Clara felt a chill run down her spine, but she couldn't look away. The figure began to move, slowly making its way through the village. Clara watched in horror as it approached her house. She backed away from the window, but it was too late. The Shadow Man had seen her. The door creaked open, and a cold wind swept through the house. Clara's grandmother rushed in, her face pale with fear. "It's him," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The Shadow Man." Clara's grandmother pulled her into a tight embrace, trying to shield her from the terror that was about to unfold. The room grew colder, and the sound of footsteps echoed through the house. The Shadow Man was inside. Clara's grandmother whispered a prayer, hoping to protect them, but the Shadow Man was relentless. He moved through the house with a slow, deliberate pace, searching for his prey. Clara could feel his presence drawing nearer, the air growing colder with each step. Suddenly, the door to their room burst open. The Shadow Man stood in the doorway, his eyes glowing brighter than ever. Clara's grandmother stepped forward, trying to protect her, but the Shadow Man simply raised a hand, and she was thrown aside like a rag doll. Clara was paralyzed with fear. She felt a darkness envelop her, pulling her into a void. She struggled, but it was no use. The Shadow Man was too powerful. Just as she was about to be consumed by the darkness, Clara remembered her grandmother's words. She closed her eyes and whispered the prayer her grandmother had taught her. The Shadow Man paused, his grip loosening. Clara's voice grew stronger, repeating the prayer over and over. The darkness began to recede, and the Shadow Man let out a bone-chilling scream. He released Clara and retreated, his form dissolving into the shadows. The cold wind stopped, and the room grew warm again. Clara opened her eyes to find her grandmother beside her, weak but alive. The Shadow Man was gone. The village was safe, at least for another 10 years. Clara's grandmother hugged her tightly, tears of relief streaming down her face. The villagers never spoke of that night again, but they knew the legend was true. The Shadow Man was real, and he would return. But Clara had faced him and survived, a beacon of hope in a village shrouded in fear. From that day on, Clara was known as the girl who defeated the Shadow Man. She never forgot the terror of that night, but she also remembered the strength she found within herself. The legend of the Shadow Man lived on, but so did the story of Clara's bravery.